Welcome back, welcome back. Good to see you again. My next guests are two of the rising stars in French cinema and beyond. Louis Garrel is an actor and director, while Lea Seydoux is an actress. She's starred in French films, but also in Hollywood films too, where she's currently, for instance, a villain in the new Tom Cruise hit Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol. Lea has starred in Louis' latest film as well, called Petit Tailleur, Little Tailor. And they popped into the studio here on their way to the film's premiere as part of the My French Film Festival in London. But before we meet them, let's see a clip of the film.
Merci pour les fleurs.
Pourquoi on doit se cacher?
C'est le metteur en scène. J'ai pas envie de le voir.
Et ça, y a un problème?
Vous mettez pas de parfum? C'est bien.
Ouais, ça suffit. Tu me dis tu, sinon je m'en vais.
Moi aussi, il faut que je te prévienne.
Quoi?
Les garçons, j'en ai fait souffrir des milliers.
Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Where did you get the idea for this film, Little Tailor, that it was a film you wanted to direct? What?
You know, I was reading like a book of Jean Renoir, and he said to like an advertisement to the young directors, if you want that the Japanese, the English, if they want to be interested in the French cinema, you have to talk about what you know, and you have to talk about what you feel exactly. Like if a Japanese is interested about the French cinema, it's because he wants to know the streets where you go, you know, through and everything. So I decided to film my friends, like Jean Renoir told me, and it was easy because you know they were available. And then when I met Lea Seydoux.
And what made this film appeal to you as an idea? Made you say yes?
Maybe working with Louis, because Louis is from my generation, and we are from the same family. That's why.
Yeah, family. But you've got lots of the family. We're also in films or stage and so on. You're surrounded with that in your family, for instance, aren't you?
Yeah. My grandfather passed away like 6 months ago. He was an actor, and my father is a director, and my mother is an actress. So I was obliged, at the age of 5, beaten by my family to be an actor.
There was no chance of you doing anything else, was there?
There was a chance, but small.
Small,
yeah.
So it didn't happen. And there was a chance you nearly became an opera singer?
Yeah, I wanted to be an opera singer.
Yeah. And you wanted that until you were 18, or? Until
I was maybe 15. Then I become too shy. So.
Yeah. Are you really shy?
Yes, I am. Can't you see that I'm blushing?
No. Are you?
Yes, but I have too much makeup. That's why.
But I mean, the more you become famous, do you become more shy, or surely you become less shy? Do you?
I think more shy.
More shy?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You're handling it awfully well here. Awfully well.
Thank you.
Lots of films that you appeared in, talked about, people have said there's a lot of ménage à trois in French films. Have you found that? You said yes. You said it's a...
Yes, I say yes, but definitely yes. You know, last time I was with a French, English woman, and I was showed like some French films. And I showed the first film was the story of, it was a Claude Sauté film. I don't know if you know Claude Sauté. It's a good director. It was the story of a man with a new wife, and he was thinking to the ex-wife. Then I saw François Truffaut's film. Do you know François Truffaut's film? It's a good French director, the best one, part of the new wave. It was the story of a man married who fell in love to a new young girl. Then another film. I mean, this is the part of the cinema, because I think the cinema is the son of the French literature and the French theater. So the French theater, like Musset, Marivaux, Molière, there is a lot of stories about love and complication in love. And your cinema, in USA and also in United Kingdom, you are the son of Shakespeare. And the son of the films, Shakespeare, you know, it's the story of the battles and the fight and the treason and everything. Yeah. So in the French cinema, we are more like interested about the complication in love, yeah. That's completely
true. As a contrast between the two of you, who you are together, you're more concerned, in fact, with, in addition to French films, making it big in America too, which you're doing successfully, the big film, the blockbuster, as well as the smaller French film, whereas the smaller French film is more what you enjoy doing. What's the reason for that? Was it that you couldn't resist the challenge of Hollywood?
Yeah, completely. Yeah. And you know, it's also a part of my culture, because when I was a young girl, I used to travel a lot in America. So I felt that, in a way, the American culture is also my culture.
So do you see your life for the next few years being, as it were, commuting between Paris and Hollywood?
Why not? We never know, but yeah, why not?
How is it different? I mean, the actual act of acting on a set, how different is it between in your homeland and in
It's not really different.
Not really different.
Yeah, the difference is more about the culture. That's what is really different.
Right.
Yeah.
The culture.
Yeah, the culture. It's
the culture that's
only about
surrounded.
culture, I think. It's not.
Would you be happy, in fact, doing a film in Hollywood, or would you find it odd?
Can you see my English? It would be a nightmare. It would be a nightmare for Hollywood directors, because my English is so bad, and you know, they don't need the cinema. You know, the American cinema sometimes they dream about the French. The French dream about the cinema. That's why Lea is so loved in USA, because she's the essence of the French heroine. You know what I mean?
No, but you did a movie in English.
Yeah, I didn't know. It was an Italian director, because I did a movie with Bertolucci when I was 19 years old. But she's the perfect dream of France in the head of the Hollywood directors, Lea. But they don't dream about like French actors.
There's no justice. There's no justice.
No, maybe I could. No, maybe I could be once in a movie of Sofia Coppola. Maybe this is what I can dream about. But definitely there is no Hollywood dream for me, because they don't need French actors. You said
before she died so tragically, you said about Amy Winehouse. You said, you can tell that I love her. She's a great actress on stage when she sings. She's so powerful sexually and so on. Were you a real fan of Amy Winehouse?
Yeah, more than fan. She was all the distress and the tragedy on her shoulders, and everybody was looking for the reason, because we couldn't understood what exactly was the reason of her tragedy, the tragic soul that she had inside, and she was trying to express that and in every song. So it was fantastic and beautiful, and she was helping people to get, I don't know, to get past through the tragic in the existence, because
yes, that was a tragic death. Well, many deaths are tragic, but
she was sacrificed. She's like a sacrifice. Yeah. It's terrible.
Looking ahead, what's your big ambition? What's the dream come true for you, Lea?
That's a big question. I don't really know. I only know that I have ambition for everything, for my life, maybe more than my work.
Really, the life's more important.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, it's great having you both here. It really is.
Thank you.
I hope you have a great time tonight at the Premium, as they say in America.
Yeah.
And
now we've been interviewed by David Frost. There is a part of our ambition done.
What a lovely thing to say. Well, it's part of my ambition to interview you both too, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks a million.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
The global credit crunch has made economists of us all, or nearly, as we, the taxpayers, bear the burden of mass spending cuts and bank meltdowns. Europe, of course, is on the brink of another crisis, and the markets again are shaky. Greece is in turmoil, and if it defaults on its mountain of debts, the rest of the Eurozone could very well follow. Vicky Pryce, Managing Director of FTI Consulting, was born in Greece, from which she's just returned, so she's up to the minute. This current crisis, one of many we've seen, could this be the crisis to end the current crisis, or do you think it's inevitable that whatever happens in this crisis, there will be more and more crises?
I think there will be more crises, but it is very important to get this one over, because that's going to determine how we move forward. So there has to be an agreement right now on, first of all, how the haircut will happen. In other words, how the private sector, which is involved in lending to Greece, will deal with the fact that Greece simply cannot repay all of its debt. So they will have to accept a loss of possibly 50%, maybe more. That needs to be agreed so that the next bailout package, which was agreed months ago, which is about 130 billion euros, comes through to Greece. Otherwise, Greece is bankrupt and won't be able to meet any of its obligations. Now, there are some coming up very, very soon. March the 20th, it needs to refinance about 14.5 billion of debt. And if it hasn't got this agreement through, then we will find that Greece basically becomes bankrupt.
What about, sometimes one wants to hear more about, what is it like today with this perennial crisis, particularly in Greece? What is life like for the average Greek? In what way is it worse? Is it worse?
It's much, much worse. Their living standards have been reduced very significantly. Public sector employment, although it stayed reasonably high, it should in fact have been reduced even faster than it has so far. That's one of the problems. But wages have been cut in the public sector very significantly. General demand in the economy has gone down. I mean, growth is non-existent. We saw a decline of something like 7% in GDP, in activity in the economy in 2011, which followed a further fall the previous year. And it's likely to continue. So the forecast for 2012 are that Greece is going to suffer a further decline in activity by more than 2%. So you can imagine what it means in terms of unemployment, in terms of youth unemployment, which is above 40% right now. Unemployment itself is more than 18% and probably not even calculated properly. It's probably even higher than that. Businesses are closing continuously. I mean, basically, people are not spending. Do people have enough food? Well, there is a lot of talk right now about what, in particular, the sort of poorer in the population are suffering, which includes them, in fact, running out of food and other things they need. So the soup kitchens that always existed in Greece, because they get huge amount of illegal immigrants coming through as a first sort of entry point into Europe, now say that 50% of the people they serve are Greeks, which is unheard of. And there has also been an increase in, as you would expect and happened elsewhere, in the suicide rate. So particularly businesses that have gone bust, their owner has tended to, I mean, the way they do it in Greece, jump from the balcony because you have high-rise buildings. And that has really increased very substantially. So there is a feeling of, shall I say, despondency among the population right now, but there is also a feeling of wait and see. Maybe things will get worse, but hopefully we can turn around the corner.
Meanwhile, the danger is obviously if it goes on to a default or whatever, that rather terrifying word, contagion, comes in, doesn't it? And that is an immediate danger, isn't it? Indeed.
I think the fact that Greece was not dealt with a year ago as it should have been dealt with, the problem was then quite small, has already meant that we've seen contagion spreading, and that's why the yields on all the other countries' bonds have also gone up very significantly, and they're having difficulty themselves actually meeting some of their obligations. And indeed, if there is a default, if there is no real agreement, then what will basically happen is that everyone will reevaluate the strength of the banks that have all lent to Greece, because of course what they have on the balance sheets will be worthless. So they will need huge capital injections, either from their own government or from the stability finance mechanism that's been set up to assist in that way, in order to survive. And we are going to see this effect spreading through Europe. And of course, if Greece defaults, why not some of the other countries?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vicky. Back in 2008, John Bradley was dubbed an alarmist for uniquely, yet at the same time accurately, predicting an Egyptian uprising. While he was a couple of years ahead of his time, he was right, and his publications were banned by Hosni Mubarak's regime. In his new book, out this very week, After the Arab Spring, his key message is a simple one. Everything we've been told about the Arab Spring is wrong. He joins me now to discuss how, in his view, political Islam has hijacked the revolutions across the Middle East. We talk to him now. That basic thing, everything we are told about the Arab Spring was wrong. That's a memorable statement. Let's hear more about it, why you say it.
We were told from the very beginning that these uprisings were derive from a thirst for democracy and Western-style elections and freedom of expression and so on. But in fact, they had economic roots. In Tunisia, the uprising started in the deep south, the impoverished deep south. The uprising in Syria, for example, started in Deraa, a city in the south which had been suffering a drought for 3 years. In Egypt, an extensive opinion poll just after Mubarak left power showed that even those who went to Tahrir, only 19% of them said that free and fair elections were their top priority. 65% put the economy as their top priority. So first of all, this wasn't a mass movement, as we were told.
But then, on the other hand, you could say that most political demonstrations are not mass movements. The number of people, under 50% of people, vote in America and things
well,
like
there
that.
we are, and this is the great irony of the Arab Spring, in the sense that the Islamists, some of whom are openly declare that they only want to get elected in order to abolish the electoral process, were able to manipulate the electoral process in precisely the way that you're suggesting, which is to say that they need to get a majority from the minority who vote. So, for example, in Tunisia, only 50% of the total population registered to vote, and only 40% of those voted. So the Islamists managed to get all of their supporters to the polling booths, and although about 80% of Tunisians didn't vote for them, they triumphed. Because what matters is not if you have mass support or popular support in general, you just have to get the majority of the people who vote.
But as I say about America and so on, this is not just a sort of a trick of Islamists, is it?
Oh, no, no, it's whoever manipulates a process. But the point is that if after 300-400 years we haven't got it right, how did we expect the Arabs to get it right overnight? And in the same way that we have certain factors that manipulate the electoral process, for example, corporate funding and branding and so on, the Islamists were perfectly poised to fill that gap, post-revolutionary gap, because they have the slogans and their parties are better known, and they have the funding too.
So it sounds from what you're saying, though, you're saying making the general point and so on, that in fact the Arab Spring has not improved people's lives or countries' relationships with other countries very much at all.
Not at all. For example, if we go back to the beginning, you may remember that this whole thing was sparked by a young man called Mohamed Bouazizi in Tunisia, a vegetable seller who set himself alight, committed suicide in public. And again, his gripe was that he didn't have a job, not that he didn't have, wasn't able to express himself freely. Now, in the week leading up to the first-year anniversary, 4 Tunisians set themselves alight and killed themselves in protesting the same thing. That suggests to me that the situation now in Tunisia is 4 times worse than it was a year ago, and unemployment has skyrocketed, poverty has skyrocketed, the crime situation is awful, there are almost no tourists still, foreign investment is at 0, and I've just come back from Tunisia, and people there are very depressed. And in the Arab way, find ways of joking about it. One Tunisian, when he told me he was depressed, I said, well, you have freedom of expression now, you have democracy. And he said, oh yeah, sure, I'm going to, tomorrow I'm going to the supermarket, and I'm going to say, I want this bread please, and this milk, and so on, and I'm going to pay with democracy. He said, you know, it doesn't help me, frankly. Freedom for him, he said, was having money in his pocket. And he had more money in his pocket during the Ben Ali regime era than he does now.
But what about Libya? Isn't that progress in some ways, or the opposition coming through in Syria? Is that not progress, or you think that's going to fall apart in a strange way too?
The problem is that, first of all, Syria now is the only secular regime left in the Arab world. The Gaddafi regime, like Ben Ali's regime in Syria, was also secular. And the rebels who ousted him with NATO's help, many of them were openly declared that they had formerly fought with Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan and Iraq. And now they're infighting. The Islamists are upset at the new election rules because they favour certain tribes. The tribes are infighting, and even the Islamist militia militias are infighting. Syria, similarly, you have a secular regime in a country that for centuries, where for centuries people of different faiths have lived in harmony. Now the mainstream opposition is dominated by the Muslim Brotherhood, and the so-called Free Syrian Army is actually made up not only of deserters from the Syrian army, but foreign jihadis. And so for me, although I have no time for the Assad regime, it's perfectly understandable why there's been no mass uprising in that country, because for the majority of Syrians, the overwhelming majority of Syrians, especially as they've seen the example of Libya and Tunisia and Egypt, the negative example, set by very sudden and radical change, better the devil they know, which is the Assad regime, rather than horrible inter-ethnic slaughter and civil war.
But if, for instance, you say that there's not been a total uprising in Syria, but probably been as high a percentage of people with all the demonstrations that have gone on in Syria as in Libya, perhaps.
Yeah, but remember, without NATO's help, the uprising in Libya would never have succeeded. NATO was, its mandate was to protect civilians, but it went way beyond that mandate and in fact killed more Libyan civilians, some people have argued, than Gaddafi himself did. So that's really the dilemma that the West faces at the moment. Without a no-fly zone and without foreign intervention, the number of people who are going onto the streets in Syria are not sufficient to threaten the regime. Remember, back in 1982, the same regime effectively slaughtered as many as perhaps 40,000 in the city of Hama and razed that city to the ground, and it took 4 or 5 years for them to re-establish stability throughout the country. And this as well was at a time of extraordinary turmoil, but 30 years later and they're still there. And so I can't see the Assad regime falling in the near future.
But I mean, the situation at the moment is surely that the very fact that democracy in various forms and so on is happening in the Middle East, even if you're not crazy about who wins, but that must be some sort of progress, surely.
Yes, of course, but the problem is that if you believe, as I do, that the root causes of these revolutions were not a lack of freedom, they were economic, and the economies are now in far worse shape. There's one study published recently that suggested that the region as a whole has so far lost $55 billion as a result of this Arab Spring. And countries like Yemen and Syria, Egypt, Tunisia have been put back decades economically.
Well, I don't see how that could happen in Egypt or somewhere. Decades?
Yes.
Put back decades?
Put back decades. The poverty rate has skyrocketed. Unemployment has skyrocketed. I mean, if you ask ordinary Egyptians now what they think of the protesters in Tahrir, for example, the overwhelming majority of ordinary Egyptians are completely against them. They're with the army and they want stability. And these calls for greater transparency and freedom of expression and so on, and free and fair elections ring hollow in Egyptian society.
Well, that's a fascinating point of view and so on, and it does bring a whole different aspect to the look at the Arab Spring, and we'll follow up on that. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. And that's all for this week, I'm afraid. My thanks to all of my guests, of course. Do join me again in 7 days' time, 7 days' time, for another Frost Over the World. See you there.